This is a video looking at the 3 different methods for you to be able to solve a quadratic equation. So we've got factorization, completing the square, and the quadratic formula. So, first of all, factorization. Just to recap, this should be really simple from GCSE. Just remember that we're looking for 2 numbers that multiply to make the term on the end and add to make the term in the middle. In this case here, 2 numbers that multiply to make 12 and add to make minus 8. It's going to have to be negative 2 and negative 6. So I will have x minus 2, x minus 6. And so we can see those multiply together to make the plus 12. The minus, the negative 2 times the negative 6 gives positive 12. And we'll see we'll get the minus, the negative 2x and the negative 6x to give the negative 8x there. Therefore, I know that this times this would equal 0. So either this needs to be 0 or this needs to be 0. So either x needs to be 2 or x needs to be 6. Because when x is 2, that's going to be 0, or when x is 6, that's going to be 0. So those are your 2 solutions for that quadratic equation. Next, completing the square. So you will use completing the square perhaps when factorization doesn't work. So if you're looking at this type of equation, you're thinking, I'm trying to find 2 numbers that multiply to make positive 8 and add to make negative 8. There are no numbers that you can pick to do that. So we're going to use completing the square to do this process. Obviously, factorization is the first thing you try because it's the quickest and the easiest. If it doesn't work though, completing the square is what you go to. So, half the term in the middle, that goes inside the squared term. Subtract this number squared, and then remember we've still got this 8 over here. Simplify this. So the minus 16 plus 8 is minus 8. And there we go, we've completed the square. If you are at all rusty with that, if you're not entirely sure of that process, you need to go back and watch the previous videos that I've shown on this process. Next, in order to actually solve the equation then, I need to make x the subject. So I'm going to take that 8 and move it to the other side. I am then going to square root both sides. And just remember, when you square root, you will always get a positive and a negative answer. Really important. You get a positive answer and a negative answer whenever you square root something. The other thing that's useful to do, root 8, you should recognise that as a surd that you can simplify. Root 8, well that's the same thing as root 4 times 2, which is the same thing as the square root of 4 times the square root of 2. And the square root of 4 is 2. So you can rewrite root 8 as being 2 root 2. You should remember that from GCSE. But the final step now, add the 2 over to the right hand side, so you'll have a 2 plus or minus 2 root 2. And those are your 2 solutions for that equation when you use complete the square. Okay, your final option is using the quadratic formula, which is this thing. You should recognise that from GCSE, you'll have used it over and over again. And I'm not going to go through it all now, I've just shown the working out here. You should know this. A is 5, B is 9, C is negative 11. Substituting those into the formula, just making sure you use brackets whenever you've got a negative. So substituting that in, making sure you get the correct answers, and I've rounded them there. You could leave them in the exact form, or you could round them and leave them in an approximate form, depending on what the question is asking you to do. This formula is actually, it's the same thing as completing the square. And I'll show you that, I'll prove that to you in the next video. This formula is not something that's completely just been made up. It comes from completing the square, and I'll show that to you in the next video. But anyway, those are your three methods for solving a quadratic equation. Factorization is the first thing you use because it's simplest, it's quickest. If it won't factorize though, you can use either complete the square or you could use the quadratic formula.